So welcome, Professor Dr. Jargros. At the behest of Golden Signatures and Indian Observer Post, I extend a warm welcome to you. You are the founding global director at Kidzania. Mr. Gross, you have been at the helm of revolution in children's education in the UK and across the 24 countries, spanning 5 continents. And at this stage of your life, uh, Dr. Jargros, you had a lifetime of highly enriching and have added numerous feathers of your cap. You have won several international accolades for your services towards children and presently in a new role. You are an advisor to various top global world organizations. So, welcome once again, Professor Dr. Jargros, to the Indian Observer Post's exclusive interview. So, my first question to you is, since you are such a great global thought leader who wears several hats, how do you describe yourself? Please tell us about your little family background, your origin, initial life, and your journey from childhood education to an accomplished knowledge professional and leader.
Thank you for having me today, and I shall attempt to answer that first question as briefly and as efficiently as I can. So I grew up in the south of the Netherlands, went to school, went to university in the Netherlands, then moved to the UK and became a teacher, and subsequently became a manager and a leader, and moved into what some parts of the world call administration rather than face-to-face working with children. And what effectively happened is this, that there are two observations. One is, it is still the case that if we are very good teachers and we want to gain promotion, then I think teaching is probably the only profession where we promote people away from what they're good at. So if you're a brilliant teacher, your promotion means that you are going to get less time with the children in the classroom, i.e. your brilliance, and you become a head of department, or you become a principal, or whatever. And the second thing, and this is also globally true, is that over the years, certainly during my working life, the curriculum has narrowed. We are testing children more, and we're a greater believer in league tables, of course, including PISA. So the system and the structure has become the obsession and the golden rule, and not the individual child. And that strikes me as fundamentally wrong. So I kind of moved more and more away from that and more towards learning outside the classroom and experience-based learning. So How do I describe myself after all those years? Experience, which is another word for old, and having learned my lessons along the way, and working with people to give my experience to those people so that they don't make the mistakes I make. Yeah. So it really is as simple as that, I think.
Thank you. Tell us about the various turning points in your life and life-changing experiences that prompted you to become a person like this as you are today.
Certainly for me, the various turning points in my life have clearly led me to the conclusion that there are no straight lines, right? In terms of career progression, professional progression, probably also personal progression. But also that those turning points are invariably linked to people. People you meet, people you work with, people you care for, people you love. So one of the first turning points was my German teacher at school, who I admired so much and who clearly trusted and believed in me that I wanted to be like him. So I became a German teacher. In my professional life later on, there are a number of people like Mrs. Daines, who was my very first head teacher, who were so exceptional and exemplary in what they did, but were such brilliant people managers that they encouraged you to become better, broader, wider thinking, child-focused. So all the turning points are linked to people I had the privilege to meet and had the privilege to work with. And I will look at the positive side of things. Of course, there are also turning points where you may meet people who are slightly less visionary and slightly less pleasant, but
Yeah.
I think they deserve to be forgotten. So on the positive side, it is about en route various points where you can literally go, I learned that from that person, I did that because of that, and I became that because of them all.
Professor Gross, so how did you develop that idea for the career education at primary phase, and what was thought behind? How did you thought that it is going to become a globally hit idea?
I think, it all sounds really grand, doesn't it? But I think it's common sense. So effectively what happens is when you begin to talk to children and you ask them the question, why do you go to school? And the answer is because I have to, then you know there must be something wrong because it's a sad answer and it's a bad answer.
Mhm.
And actually, what we seem to have lost is purpose. We don't know why we go to school anymore, why we do certain things. So clearly, the textbook in the classroom does not provide that answer, but the connection with the real world does. So you can learn about being a pilot from the textbook for weeks on end, but there will never be quite anything like meeting a pilot, being able to ask questions and listen to them. So it's a very practical application. It is the appliance of the science, if you wish, to connect to reality. And purpose is a very important thing because when we understand why we do certain things and how we do them, then we can also begin to understand what ambitions and aspirations are, and we find the routes and the steps.
And what was your experience when you founded this, idea and you become the chief executive of the Children's University way back in 2007? What was your experience?
That was all, well, the experience was overwhelming, really, because it was all about giving people, children can only aspire to what they know exists. So what we need to do is broaden their horizons, show them more, give them more experiences, and let them learn rather than be taught. And the experience from that development in 2007 was overwhelming because there was very clearly an appetite and a realization, not just among schools, but also amongst parents and universities. So within 7 years, what was a small seed became a phenomenon that was in, I think it was in 11 countries at that point. And I remember going to the first graduation of the Children's University in Australia at Adelaide University and kind of being blown away. But the other thing is, what was also very clear was that this was not, this absence of purpose and the lack of experience was not just a UK phenomenon. It quite clearly resonated in many other countries.
Professor Gross, India is also in a phase of, I can see that it's a kind of transition, and it has come up with a new and own revolutionary idea of new education policy, NEP 2020, which has been launched, and naturally India also wants to compete with the global educational quality and standard. So how do you see the NEP 2020 in Indian context?
I think I'm an optimist. So firstly, positively, and I base that optimism on my experiences in India, where amongst many people, the majority, I would think, education is very highly valued. It is seen as a route to better places in life, like a satellite navigation system to better places in life is education. I think, however, I do think for any policy, including a policy as ambitious as the NEP, to succeed, it needs to recognize and value its teachers. It needs to have highly qualified teachers, highly qualified support staff. It needs to recognize those people through the way they're treated and respected in society and the way that they're remunerated. You need to create the workforce, the engine to drive your policy. I think what we see all too often is we have lots of politicians and civil servants developing lots of policies, but they forget that they are not the people to implement those policies. And there is a disconnect between those who actually drive the vehicle, the teachers, and those who invent it. I would strongly recommend for the Indian government to engage even more and even better with the teaching profession and indeed the parents, because we have to understand that parents are co-educators and we need to bring that principle back. I'm slightly nervous about how much or how little attention is being spent on the driving of that policy. And that's not, incidentally, an Indian phenomenon. I think you could find that probably in most countries. There is this thing about we want to be the best, but we don't want to pay for it. And we look at in envy sometimes at Scandinavian education and schooling systems. But one has to understand that the Scandinavian system is backed by finance and taxation with the agreement of the population. What you cannot have is the best education system in the world funded by American levels of taxation, for example. The calculator doesn't make that add up. So I am joyous about the NEP. I am also nervous about the NEP because I think when we make big promises, we need to be seen to be delivering rather than just limp along for the next 4 years to get re-elected. I think sometimes I have a problem with politicians being in charge of education. I think it should be left to experts.
I think your thoughts are very valuable, and it would be brought into the notice of the decision makers, policy makers, and also to the opinion makers in our Indian society. I will make sure that in this interview, the clips of this interview goes to those people. They will watch it, and I hope the good sense will prevail. And I think they will seriously understand your idea. Thank you very much for this time, Professor Gross. I wanted to have a long interview, but we have a very short span of time, and next time I will be doing a longer interview with you for this time. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks again.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, and I'll look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.